there, Nation, and welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and we are back with another episode of Cheap Shots, and this is the series that's dedicated to showing you how to save money on the miniatures wargaming hobby. And on today's episode, we're going to show you guys how to quickly, as well as more importantly, cheaply paint up the new Gallow Dark terrain that comes in the new starter set for Kill Team Into the Dark. As you can see, this is an overhead shot of all the pieces that are included in that kit. If anybody's played Kill Team or 40k knows, this has been a huge terrain set that has been advertised by Games Workshop, and a lot of people have been really excited about doing this. The only problem is that people have been trying to find a way to cheaply paint up this set as well as quickly paint it up as well, because there's a lot of details on it. There's a lot of really cool, interesting little nooks and crannies on the whole set, and at the same time, it can be quite expensive to paint. Now, I'm going to tell you guys right off the bat, the total cost to actually paint up this set to look like to this standard, it's going to cost you $29.91 using our Cheapskate method. And when you compare the materials that you need to purchase from Zenithal as well as Army Painter in order to paint up this way, you're talking about a grand total savings of $139.09 as well. Now, if you want to know how long it took me to actually paint this set from after I assembled it and started putting paint directly onto it, it took me about a week's worth of work. I would say about 14 hours in total was pretty much how it works, because I usually paint anywhere between 2 to 1.5 hours a day in the evenings as a way to decompress as well as to relax and, you know, to also enjoy my hobby. So that's how long it took me to actually paint up this entire set as well. So we're going to go ahead and run down the list of exactly what you'll need in order to paint up your miniatures to look exactly like this using our Cheapskate method. And let's go ahead and talk about exactly what you need to do in order to make that happen. Alright, so the first thing you do, of course, is to prep as well as assemble all of your miniatures. So as you can see right here in this box set, I have the entire Gallow Dark terrain set all assembled together. I have all the columns made, I have all the bits and pieces attached as well as the doors, and all of the extra accessories that came with it. Now, this process, of course, took a while to do because, you know, these are actually quite intense terrain kits. And at the same time, I also sanded down any rough edges as best I could using a sander and an emery board in order to do so. Now, you might notice there might be some mold portions on here. Those I can't sand down with the emery board, I just kind of leave. And the reason why is because I know you can use a hobby knife to scrape away mold lines and things of that nature. The problem with me, though, is that I have a horrible track record with sharp objects. Like, if you look at my hands, I have like scars all over my hands from times I messed up with cutting things. So I'm very uncomfortable with using the hobby knives to cut stuff. So more often than not, I just sand them down if I possibly can. But once you have all of your miniatures assembled and prepped, the next thing you do, of course, is to start priming them. In this situation, though, we will not be priming them in the traditional sense. We'll be using as a series of spray paints in order to paint majority of these miniatures very, very quickly. Alright, so the first thing you do, of course, is to spray your miniatures over with the same exact color. Now, this method I'm going to be using in order to do the spraying system is actually something I've learned from Guerrilla Miniatures Wargaming. Ash on that channel actually has a really cool series of tutorials of how he quickly painted up some Kill Team terrain using this method. And so, two of these methods I'm going to talk about now is exactly what I use from that. What he does is that he actually sprays paints the entirety of the miniature in a dark mocha color from Krylon spray paints, and that's exactly what I used here. I used Krylon satin spray paint in a dark mocha color. It cost me $4.99 at my local Walmart. All I do is I just spray the entirety of the miniature down with this Krylon dark mocha, as if you're doing a priming, for example. As you can see in this picture too, I also made sure to leave the doors open when I did the spray paint, so that way I can get the inside of the frame of the doors, as well as both sides of the door, as well as the inside framing as well. And all you gotta do is just do an all-over coat with this like you would normally do as a primer. Now, what this is gonna do is gonna do a couple of things. The first thing it's gonna do is gonna give an uneven surface for our miniature paint to actually adhere to it, so that way it doesn't slide off and ruin the finish. And the second thing it's going to do too is also to give this kind of like dingy, kind of rusted undercoat for the entirety of the paint job. And because the reason why is because the next spray paint will be a Zenithal highlight, so part of it will look like it's like this kind of teal blue, while the other part of it will look like it's a rusting metal. Very, very fast and effective way of painting up miniatures very, very quickly. Alright, so the next step for the walls, as you can see here, we're going to do another spray paint, this time using a Zenithal highlight. We're going to take a can of Krylon, once again deep teal, satin paint, Rust-Oleum deep teal paint. What we're going to do is we're going to take this paint and point it at a 45-degree angle, about 12 inches away from the miniatures, and just lightly dust it at a 45-degree angle. What this is going to do is going to let this teal color catch upon the raised surfaces of the miniature and the highlights of it, while at the same time, if you look at these miniatures, look towards the base, you can still see a lot of that brown is still there as well. What this does, it gives this kind of like, oddly enough, when you get done doing this, it actually makes it look like the entirety of the miniature was like this teal color at first, but over time and weathering, it looks like it's got weathering down the further down you go, as if like drips and stains and oils and fluids and weathering and just like that just kind of crept down the walls and just kind of like rusted everything and made it look really really dirty and dingy. So it has this really beautiful effect when you actually do that, and I highly recommend that you do this for all the wall sections, the pillars, the caps of the walls, the entire thing. And actually, oddly enough, you actually paint most of your miniature by actually doing this. So once the spray paint has dried and cured, the next thing we do now, of course, is to do a quick dry brush. Now, I forgot to take a photo of this step. I do apologize about that. I was kind of eager and a little over-eager when I was actually painting these up, so I forgot to take some photos, so I do apologize for that. What we're going to do is we're actually going to dry brush the entire thing with Folk Art Pale Gray, which is a nice pale gray, almost white color that's made by Folk Art. Runs about 75 cents. What we're going to do is take a very large brush and just kind of basically do dry brushing all over the entirety of the surfaces. What this gray paint's going to do is going to catch on the raised surface of the miniature while leaving that darker teal and brown in the recesses of the miniature as well. So it's going to bring out a lot of those details that you did not see earlier during the spray painting phase. And what this does is it also kind of adds like this kind of dusty kind of look to it as well, so make it look like there's like dust has been settling on top of everything, which is absolutely fantastic. At the same time, on a side note, this dry brushing will help you to bring out those details so that way you know exactly what to paint. And as you can see in this photo alone, there's a lot of details on these wall sections. There are skulls, there's computers, there's terminals, there's wires, there's pipes, there's all kinds of things. And then at first, I will admit, when you look at it all the first time, it looks extremely intimidating. It's like, oh my god, what have I got myself into? I'm going to be spending forever and a day to paint these. And I felt exactly the same way when I started doing this as well. So if you feel that way, don't feel bad, because I'm a veteran painter. Even I felt that as well. But oddly enough, if you break it down into sections and do like an assembly line style of painting, it actually goes by very, very quickly. So as you can see in this next step, what I decided to do is to pick out all the skulls, all the servo skulls that are located throughout the entirety of the decking of the walls. And for that color, I use Light Mocha by Apple Barrel Paint. It cost me 50 cents at my local Walmart. All I do is I put 2 thin coats of this Light Mocha on all the skulls. So as you can see on these walls, there's a lot of skulls like stuck in nooks and crannies and operating systems and servo skulls. So all you gotta do is just find those details, put them 2 thin coats, and then once that's dry, you're ready to move on to your guys' next detail. Alright, so the next detail I decided to work on real quick is all of the cabling that you see pretty much hanging around everywhere. So throughout the entirety of these wall structures, you can see these loose cables and wires just kind of hanging all over the terrain pieces on this one. And for that, I use Lime Sherbet by Apple Barrel Paint. It's a nice chalky pastel lime green color. And the reason why I do that is because that lime green color contrasts very nicely with the blues as well as the browns that you see on these wall sections. As you can see from this angle, you can see how that brownish teal color creates that kind of weathered, rusted look on all the wall sections, so it looks really, really nice. And so because of that, that's why I use this Lime Sherbet, because it's a nice contrast color to the blues and the browns that you see here, and it actually makes it really pop and looks really interesting. It adds a lot of visual interest to these wall sections that you actually do that. So all you do, of course, is just put 1 thin coat of Lime Sherbet over all of the wirings that you see. You only need 1 layer, and the reason why is because the Lime Sherbet is a very opaque color, and it's very, very, it stands out as a contrast directly against the background, so it's going to really pop. So you really don't need to add too many layers on this as well. So just 1 thin layer should be pretty much be good about that, and then once you're done from there, move on to your next detail. So when it comes to the wall sections, the next major detail we're going to focus on are all the lights that are located along the tops of the wall sections. So as you can see, the wall sections actually have 2 types of light. They actually have like the cage light bulbs type that are above the doors. At the same time, they also got like kind of like these neon light kind of bar lights that they have scattered throughout all the different details on the terrain. Now for that color, what I decided to use for that was Winter Green by Apple Barrel Paint. It's a nice minty kind of green color. I put 2 thin coats of this stuff over all the light bars. And the reason why I do that is to kind of add like this otherworldly kind of look to it, to make it look like that this is not exactly the light systems that we're used to seeing, that this is something that might, you know, put out this kind of eerie, kind of weird eldritch glow in the hallways of the Gallow Dark. So that's the reason why I chose that color. So I just put 2 thin colors on that, and next thing we do, of course, is start working on the metallics. Now for this next section, for the metallic portions, I'm using the column tiles here that you guys see right here in front of you on this picture, just because it's a little bit easier to show you exactly what the metallic elements would look like instead of going through each of the different wall sections. So pretty much for the most part, I use 4 main colors. 3 of them are from Folk Art, the other one's from Anita's Acrylic. The Folk Art, you can actually pick that up at your local Walmart for about 75 cents, while the Anita's Acrylic, you can pick that up at your local Hobby Lobby for about 65 cents. So what I decided to do is I pretty much just picked out different elements, whether they be pipes, control panels, diodes, little different things, and just alternate the colors between those little elements by using different colors. As you can see on this picture, some of the pipes I used were made out of copper, some I used antique brass in order to paint up some of these things. For the keypads and the dials, I used Deco Art's Emperor's Gold in order to do that, and for all the silver parts that are located throughout, I used Gunmetal Gray. And the reason why I did that is I kind of alternated all these different colors, so that way it kind of adds a lot more visual interest to the miniature at the same time as adding a lot of details. The thing about this is not to make sure to use just one metallic color. If you use only one metallic color, your wall sections are going to look very bland and very bland and not interesting looking at all. But by doing the alternating metallic colors, even on metallic colors on top of other metallic colors, it adds a lot of actual visual interest because it breaks up what your eye is looking at. For example, if you look at that tile here in the bottom left hand corner, as you can see, I got some of the major panels and the plaques and stuff painted with gunmetal gray, but then I used copper and brass in order to alternate different color pipes, at the same time put the Emperor's Gold on the keypads on those wall sections to add a little bit more diversity of color. So that's all I basically did throughout the entirety of these wall sections. I just kind of picked out those details in the metallics real quick, especially those I-beam colors in the back. You can see in the top of the plaques are done Emperor Gold. I got copper for the battery packs, I got silver for all the panels, and then of course for the little key buttons, I picked those out in Emperor's Gold, and it adds a lot of variety and a lot of color to your wall sections. So once you guys get done with all the metallic elements, the next thing to do, of course, is to just take care of the small little details. For these ones, for example, like the little screens of the keypads, I picked those out 2 thin coats of winter green in order to make that look really cool. And the same thing for all the dials as well as some of the screens. I use those Delta Serum Coats Mermaid Blue, which you can get at your local Walmart for about, your local Hobby Lobby for about 65 cents. Just put those in the little dials to make it look like they're kind of glowing like this kind of ethereal, kind of bluish color to kind of give some more visual interest, as well as the colors that break up the monotony of the monotone nature of the walls. And then finally for the servo skulls, I also picked out their little lenses using True Rib by Anita's acrylic. That cost us 65 cents at your local Hobby Lobby as well. And once you have all those little smaller details taken care of, you can pretty much move on to the other sections of your walls. Now on these couple next slides, I'm giving you some detailed shots of some of the walls. Unfortunately, because these terrain pieces are so detailed heavy, I just didn't have the ability to take all the pictures all at once. So I'm going to break them down to small little chunks and show you exactly like how I slowly built up these details that I mentioned before in the previous slides on the pillars, and I applied them to the walls. So as you can see in this photo here, as you can see, I put some of the metallic colors elements on the walls, slowly building up the golds, the coppers, the brasses, as well as the silver, as you can see in some of these sections as well. At the same time, if you notice some of the screens that you see for the terminal screens, I just used normal apple barrel paints pavement and just painted those over real quick with black, because I want to make it look like those terminals have shut down and there's like no more data or information being presented on those screens. So here's a close-up of one of the door sections. As you can see, I put some black on, some Emperor's Gold on some of the plaques along the door hinges with the top of the door. I used copper and bronze for the pipe section spread throughout as well. At the same time, you can see I used some of that silver for the vents on the doors, as well as the little control panel on the left-hand side of the column there. And as you can see, I put some red dot on the little bit of the irises of the lenses on the servo skulls on the left-hand side. So this is kind of like a little bit of a close-up of how you kind of break up some of the details that you see on the wall sections. And here's another close-up of the interior of the walls. As you can see, we got some black being used, some pavement paint being used on some of the terminal screens. On this wall, this particular wall section has 2 sets of terminal screens, and the reason why I painted them black is to make it look like that these terminals are dead, they're not working anymore, and the data is not being displayed on them like they usually are. At the same time, you can also see I use the mermaid blue on the dials, and kind of breaks up the monotony of the colors you're seeing here. So you can see, by doing this with the different metallic colors, the different color elements you have here, you actually make these wall sections quite colorful. You just got to be kind of careful about how you go about spreading out those details. You just want to make sure that your wall section is not too monotone. Add some splashes of different colors in there to kind of break up the monotony of the overall color scheme that you're using on these wall sections. So here's another perfect example of this little alcove of this room that I see here. As you can see, we have all kinds of different colors being used in this wall section. We have teals and blues and greens, we have browns, we have copper and brass, we have gold and silver, we have winter green, we have lime sherbet green, we have bits of teal popping out everywhere. So as you can see, there's actually quite a variety of different colors being used, even though the wall sections themselves are largely this brownish kind of tealish kind of color. But by doing this and by breaking up the monotony and adding some little details, like for example, if you look on the fall wall, you can see some brass pipes, but I painted the handles silver, the little wheels on those, so that way it can add a little bit of detail to that. At the same time, you also got the bone elements, like the skulls popping up, and you got the red little dots from the servo skulls, also breaking up that monotony as well. So it does a really good job of just kind of breaking it out overall. And here's another detail right here over on the right hand side of another wall section. As you can see, I got a lot of silver being used as the base for the control panels. I also got copper and brass, as well as gold, breaking up some of the detail elements of the wires, as well as some of the piping that's going on. So you just want to make sure that you use different colors throughout using it. Now, if you notice, I don't really have much of a color palette on this train set. It's actually pretty simple. I just only have a handful of colors, but by alternating these colors and by picking out different details in different colors as well, it actually makes it look much more colorful than it actually is. And then once you're done with these wall sections and picking out those details, you can then move on to the accessories like the crates, the pipes, the containers, that sort of thing. And that's the next detail we'll be focusing on next. Alright, so the next detail we work on real quick are some of the engines and generators and spare pieces of equipment that we have spread throughout the Gallow Dark. So for the first thing to do, of course, is I highly suggest that you spray paint these elements just using Rust-Oleum steel colored paint. It costs you $3.99. It's a can of spray paint from you get at Walmart. And what I did is I just dusted it over the entirety of the miniatures so that I have a good even coat of silver over everything. Now what I wanted to make it look like is I want to make it look like these elements have been rusting and have been really weathered down by time inside the Gallow Dark. So once you get done spraying those with silver, the next thing you want to do is once they cure and dry is to give them a dry brush. In this case, I use Chestnut by Apple Barrel paint. It costs 50 cents at your local Walmart. It's a nice kind of medium brown color. And I like using this chestnut color, especially on silver spray paint, because when you dry brush it, it automatically creates that oxidized metal look. As you can see, we have a lot of oxidation taking place on these silver pieces just by just a simple dry brush using this chestnut brown. It's a pale enough brown to where it looks like it's oxidized metal, but it's dark enough to where it actually appears, it actually shows up with your successive layers of dry brushing on your steel elements. It actually looks really, really good as well. And if you wanted to save some money, you could actually skip this next step that I'm going to do to add some more rust effect, because this actually looks fine just the way it is. But I want to add just a little bit more detail to this, so the next thing we're going to do now is start dry brushing these with some orange. Alright, so the next step in order to make this look like rusted metal is even corroded even further, I decided just to give a quick dry brush real fast with some orange. The reason why is because, as anyone's ever seen rusted metal before, it has kind of like this orange look to it, especially if it's been weathered and exposed to water for a prolonged period of time. I know a lot of brand new players are really unsure of how to proceed to create rust effect for steel. A lot of new time painters will buy things like pigment powders or rust pigment effects or Rise of Rust from Games Workshop or any number of other hobby supplies that are offered out there, and those products are really good and they do exactly what they're advertised. The only problem is that they're kind of expensive, especially if you're a brand new painter. So if you're brand new to miniatures painting, you're looking for a way to save money, the easiest way of actually creating rust effect on metal is just to dry brush your metal metallic elements with brown and then dry brush them with orange on top of it. As you can see here, it creates a beautiful rust effect, and it's very, very cheap. In this case, I use orange by Anita's Acrylic. It costs you 65 cents. And the reason why I'm using Anita's Acrylic orange is because at the time that this picture was actually taken, I was hanging out with Iron Major and we were actually painting up stuff together, and so that's why I did that way, because I was using whatever paints he had at his house at the time. And then once, of course, you get done with all that dry brushing with the browns and the oranges, the next thing I want to do is just do a quick little highlight with some Anniversary Silver by Folk Art. Costs you about 75 cents at your local Hobby Lobby. And the reason why is because you want to make it look like that some of the metallic elements, some of the rust effect has flaked off over time, like it's been chipped away because either it's been moved or water or something else has cleared some of it out. So just do a quick little additional highlight, edge highlighting real quick of metallic Anniversary Silver just by doing a quick light dry brush, and it creates this kind of like streaking metal corroded effect. It looks really, really awesome. So the next step we're going to work out, of course, are the caps that go on top of each of the wall sections, as well as these little cargo containers you see here as well. Now, for the cargo containers, all you're going to do, of course, you're just going to spray paint those with the same Rust-Oleum steel spray paint that we used earlier with the steel color, and just do a quick overall spray with those. And once those cure, once again, we're going to do exactly the same process using browns and oranges and silvers to do our highlighting for the rust effects. So here's a close-up of the cargo containers. As you can see, all I did is I used nutmeg brown this time for my house, because this time I was painting in my house when I did this. Just did a quick dry brushing with nutmeg brown on top of the silver elements, and does an overall really nice like rust effect going on directly onto your metal. Makes it look like it's really being weathered down over time. And at the same time, the last thing we do, of course, is just add another effect of orange right on top of that brown that we did earlier, to add just a little bit more of a rust effect going on directly on all the different parts that we have as well. And I should also mention at this point as well, now once you are doing this orange dry brushing for your cargo containers, make sure you do exactly the same thing for all of the wall sections that you've done previously. Unfortunately, like I said, when I was painting these up, I got a little too overeager and I did not take pictures of some of the steps. But if you look in the background there on the left hand side, those those end caps kind of show you exactly what I'm talking about. So what I decided to do was to give this ripe tomato orange dry brushing over everything in the entirety of the terrain set. So not only did I do the metallic elements as well as these cargo containers, but I also did the caps. I did all the wall sections, all the column sections as well, to kind of give this idea that everything is kind of this rusted kind of weather effect. And then once again, you're going to do another dry brushing with Anniversary Silver by Folkart. It's a very bright silver, and you're just going to do a quick light dry brush over all the orange that we just did earlier to create this effect, like some of this the kind of chipped away and is not as weathered. So you look right here, these end caps, even though these end caps are actually quite uniform, they all look a little bit different. And the reason why they look all different is because there's different levels of dry brushing on all of them. So it adds a lot more visual interest for all of this. At the same time, I also did exactly the same thing, took that bright silver and just did a light dry brushing over all the wall sections as well to make it look like it's additionally weathered. So now that we're done with everything, the next thing we do, of course, is an oil wash real fast. So the oil wash that we use is Midwax Poly Shades Mission Oak Acrylic. It's a combination of stain as well as polyurethane, and the stain and polyurethane actually does a couple things. The first thing that it does, of course, is that it actually brings out the recesses of the miniature and adds those details. It actually seeps into the recesses and brings a lot of those details that we didn't see earlier. And that's the nice thing about the oil wash. So if you can see here with these column pictures that I have, as well as the end caps, as well as the cargo containers, it's brightened, does a couple things. First of all, it darkens down the vibrancy of the colors that we used. It also blends together the levels of dry brushing that we did on our base coating, so that way it looks more uniform, like it's more organic rather than just kind of like successive layers of paint. It blends those areas together. It also smooths out the transitions between our dry brushing as well as our base coating as well. So you can see in these column sections here, you can see where I actually did the dry brushing with the orange as well as with the silver to kind of create that rusted weather look that we had earlier. And that's another thing that oil wash does. It just kind of smooths out those transitions, darkens those vibrancies, and at the same time it brings a lot of those details out. Another thing that it also does as well is it also protects your miniature because there is polyurethane mixed with it. So here's a picture of the wall sections, and this is actually after I did the oil wash. As you can see right there, it brings a lot of those details, especially on these wall sections. So you can see now exactly how the dry brushing with the oranges and the silver with all the different colors that we've done on there. You can see how it mutes down those greens and mutes down those turquoises colors that we've had earlier, as well as the bone color, at the same time bringing a lot of those details that you couldn't see earlier. And at the same time, like I said before, with this polyurethane in there, it actually will protect your miniature, so you do have to let it sit and dry for 24 hours. And the reason why is because you want it to dry as well as cure. Now, of course, you could manipulate your miniatures, but if you do that, if you manipulate it when it's kind of tacky still, you could ruin the finish by peeling off the layers of paint that you have underneath the polyurethane. So I highly suggest you just kind of do this at the end of your painting session. For me, I usually paint in the evenings, so the very last thing I do in the evening is I do the oil wash. That way, 24 hours later when I come back to painting it, by then it's cured, and I can move on from there. But as you can see here, the oil wash does a beautiful job of bringing out a lot of those details. So here's a close-up of the wall columns real quick, so that way you can see exactly what this oil wash looks like it's doing. As you can see, it has this really bright sheen though, so that is the drawback of doing this oil method. It actually makes it very shiny is what it does because of the polyurethane. Now, if you do like that candy-coated look, you could of course skip the spray varnish, which I'm going to show next on the split slide. Me though, I do like a matte finish on a lot of my miniatures, so I will of course do a matte varnish. But as you can see here in this detail picture here, it actually does a lot to show you exactly what this oil washing method actually does and how it brings out a lot of the details that you couldn't see earlier. Alright, so now that we let our stuff dry and cure for 24 hours, next we do, of course, is a spray varnish. For me, I like using Krylon matte varnish spray. I can get this stuff in my local Walmart for about $5.99. And all I do is I just do a quick spray over the entirety of the miniatures with that spray varnish. What it does, it mutes down the sheen of the polyacrylic that we used earlier and allows all these details to kind of pop up because not being hit by the light. And like I said before, this step is entirely optional, so you can skip if you want to. And once again, this is the end result that we saw earlier. As you can see, our terrain is a beautiful tabletop finish that you could actually use for your games of Kill Team or for whatever you want to use it for any one of the gaming systems that you want to as well. So with that being said, now that we're done talking about exactly how the process went about to paint these wall sections and to create your Gallow Dark terrain, let's talk about the materials you need to buy from Zenithal and Wells Army Painter to paint up your terrain to look exactly like ours and talk about exactly how much it would cost. Alright, so first of all, this is what's going to cost you to order to paint the method we did using Citadel as well as Army Painter's gear. First of all, you'll need to use Rhinox Hide Spray, which is going to cost you $33. You have to spray down the entirety of the miniature set with that color. The next thing you'll need to do, of course, is to also Now here's the thing, the problem is that the turquoise is not available in a spray, so what you'll have to do is, I guess, a dry brush with Sons of Horus Green, which is going to cost you $7.80 as well. At the same time, for all the brown elements that we've done with the dry brushing for all the rest, you'll need to buy a Goldfag brown, which is going to cost you $4.55. And for all of the elements that we did for like the bones and also the smaller elements throughout, you'll need to use Banebraid brown as well as Cyberite green, Bugman's Glow as Gas Blaster green, Eshin gray. Those all are going to cost you $4.55 per pot. And these are things for like the skulls, the wires, the cables, and stuff like that as well. At the same time, you'll also need to buy a pot of Rise of Rust, which costs you $4.55 in order to do that rust effect with the orange oxidation effect on all your miniatures that are on the metallic elements. You also need to buy a pot of Baharoth Brew for $4.55, which is going to be for all the dials that you're painting up for that turquoise color, as well as Mephiston Red for all the red lenses for all the servo skulls. That's also going to cost you $4.55 for those. Now for the metallic elements, you'll need to buy Brass Scorpion, Lead Belcher, Screaming Bell, as well as Iron Breaker for all the silver, gold, copper, as well as the different metallic effects throughout the entirety of the paint job. Those are going to cost you $7.80 a piece. At the same time, you also need to purchase Ulthuan Gray to do the dry brushing at the first stage that we did earlier to bring out those details, which is going to cost you $4.55. If you decide to do the quick paint method like we're doing, you have to buy a pot of Army Painter Strong Tone for $32 in order to get that oil wash effect down as well. And if you decide to make your entire miniature set matte finished, you'll need to buy a can of Munitorium Varnish, which costs you $19.50 as well. Now, when you combine all these things, and assuming that you're purchasing them all for the very first time from Games Workshop and from Army Painter, you're going to come at a grand total investment of $169 in order to paint up your miniatures that look like the way we did it, but by using the Citadel as well as Army Painter products to do so. Now, when you combine that with the Cheapskate method of $29.91 and you subtract it from the cost of $169, you end with a grand total savings of $139.09 being saved, which could actually buy you quite a bit of miniatures for that cost. So the costs kind of speak for themselves. So if you're a painter who's looking for a very cheap and cost-effective way to paint up your sections for the Kill Team Into the Dark Terrain set, and you're also looking for a way to do it very quickly, might I suggest you try using our Cheapskate method in order to do so. So that's going to do it for this week, guys. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is invaluable to us as always. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest, greatest hobby news related to this channel. That's good for this one, you guys. We'll catch you guys next one. Peace out and stay classy.